So, ever since their reveal, the final evolutions of our new Alola starter Pokemon have been the topic of a lot of debate. Of course, there's the age-old debate about whether or not they're good designs, or whether or not Game Freak is running out of ideas, and that tends to come with anything new. But more importantly is the debate about the origins of their secondary typings. For those who aren't aware, the final evolution's typings are as follows. Decidueye is a grass and ghost type, Incineroar is a fire and dark type, and Primarina is a water and fairy type. The reasons for these typings has been heavily argued among fans, so I figured I'd help lay some arguments to rest while also teaching those who aren't aware a little something about the newest additions to the starter Pokemon family. Keep in mind that I'll be adventuring into every detail that I could find to support these typings, so if any point feels a little small, it probably is, but remember that Game Freak wouldn't release a design if the small details weren't taken into account, so even small points have their merit. Anyway, cue intro. Firstly, we need to talk about what all the starters represent as a whole. Now, because of Sun and Moon's ties to X and Y, it would make sense that all of their starters are connected in some way. All 6 of the last 2 generation starters represent typical RPG characters. Chestnut the Knight or Warrior, Delphox the Mage, Greninja the Rogue or Thief, Decidueye the Archer or Ranger, Incineroar the Berserker or Brawler, and Primarina the Healer or Bard. Pin this up because this will be important later. All 3 starters are also based on various endangered species throughout Polynesia. The Rowlet line is based on the Pueo owl, which I'll talk about later. The Litten line is based on the Sumatran tiger, as evidenced by it having the darkest coat of all tiger species and being the only tiger species native to Polynesia. And finally, the Popplio line is most likely based on the Hawaiian monk seal, even though Popplio is a sea lion, but hey, they're similar, and it's the only endangered Polynesian pinniped I could find. Now we'll take a look at each of the starters individually, starting with the one that's easiest to explain, Primarina. Primarina and its pre-evolutions are based on sea lions, which has absolutely nothing to do with its fairy typing. What does have something to do with it is that Primarina and Brionne are based on water spirits, typically those who utilize their voice. Brionne gets part of its name from the Ondine, or Undine, female water nymphs whose voices are said to be heard over the waters of forest ponds and waterfalls. Primarina gets its basis on Sirens, water spirits similar to mermaids that use their soothing voice to lure sailors into crashing to their deaths on rocky shores. Primarina's focus on its voice is also evidenced by Popplio learning Disarming Voice, a fairy-type move no less, very early on. Primarina also gets part of its name from Prima Donna, the lead vocalist in a group of female singers. This also inspired Primarina's signature move, Sparkling Aria, with an aria typically referring to a vocal melody. So the influence of sirens and other sweet-voiced water spirits is pretty evident in Primarina, and in a previous video where I talked about fairy types, I mentioned that most creatures from mythology, especially in Western mythology, were all grouped together as fairies. So the fact that Primarina is based on a siren and a mermaid, both technically fairies, is where the fairy typing comes from. Sparkling Aria also adds credence to Primarina's role as the healer or bard of the XY sumo starters because of the fact that it heals burns while also doing damage. That was pretty easy, so let's move on to one that's a little harder to explain, Incineroar. When these starters first leaked back in May, the one thought on everyone's mind was that Berserkat, the name given by the fans at the time, was going to be a fire fighting type yet again, due to its clear basis on a wrestler. Now that we know that it's a fire and dark type, why? Well, let's start simple. Litten, Torracat, and Incineroar are all based on tigers. It's, like, painfully obvious. So, evidence numero uno comes from the way that tigers hunt. Though they've been seen hunting during the daytime in places where humans are mostly absent, tigers mainly hunt by night, using ambush tactics to catch their prey. So first off, we have the nighttime, with a lot of dark-type Pokemon already sharing nighttime imagery. Eevee evolves into Umbreon by max friendship at night, Sneasel evolves into Weavile by holding the Razor Claw and leveling up at night, Pokedex entries for many dark types mention the nighttime, and of course there are dark type moves like Night Slash and Night Daze. Then we have the fact that tigers use ambush tactics to catch their prey, i.e. surprise attacks. The move Sucker Punch, luckily enough, is known as Surprise Attack in Japanese, and again we see Night Slash, which in Japanese is known as Crossroad Killing, a term referring to a samurai testing a new sword or fighting technique on an unsuspecting and defenseless passerby, normally at night. All of this imagery moves us to one coherent point: fighting dirty, which leads us to part of Incineroar's basis and its species name: heels. A heel, in terms of professional wrestling, is, in short, a bad guy. Now, I don't really watch wrestling or like it for that matter, so here's a picture of The Rock. Pretend I said something funny and laugh, I guess. Heels, as I said, are the bad guys in wrestling, known for fighting, if you can call professional wrestling fighting, dirty. They don't play by the rules, they're evil, just like how the dark type is actually translated as the evil type in the Japanese games. As to how the tiger and evil wrestler motifs tie together, the tiger-masked evil wrestler has been a popular persona among Japanese wrestling since the 1980s, and has been reiterated time and time again. As for its signature move, Darkest Lariat? I'm gonna say Lariat, I don't really know though. But there isn't much there. The Japanese translation doesn't offer much either, and for those who don't know, a lariat or however you want to say it, is a maneuver where one wrestler uses their arm to bring their opponent to the ground. So Darkest Lariat is probably just some overly aggressive wrestling move, and that's it. To wrap it up, Incineroar fits perfectly into the Berserker RPG role, since somebody that goes berserk probably doesn't always fight honorably. With that cat out of the bag, let's move on to our final starter evolution and my personal favorite, Decidueye and its ghost typing. Now, I'll warn you, this one is the hardest and lengthiest to explain because there is a lot that went into this Pokemon. I'm gonna get slain if I don't at least mention the Robin Hood or Green Arrow aspects of this Pokemon, but just because Decidueye has a hood doesn't mean that he's based on these characters. Archers were typically warriors of stealth, so a hood was one of the best ways to conceal their identity. Plus, it just looks so cool. With that out of the way, let's move on to Decidueye and its pre-evolutions being based on owls. Of course, in most cultures, owls are seen as a symbol of wisdom, but in some, they are seen as a symbol of death. So we can already chalk up 1 point for the ghost typing. Physically, Decidueye and its evolutionary line probably get their basis from barn owls, pueo owls, and stilt owls, a species of owls once native to Hawaii which has since gone extinct, meaning they're all dead, alluding just partially to Decidueye's ghost typing. Conceptually, Decidueye is probably based on the pueo owl, which is also on the brink of extinction. Pueo are said to be a type of Aumakua, guardian spirits taking a physical form to better protect their descendants. It's even said that the mana or spirit energy of Pueo reaches all the way to the spirit world. This focus on spirits adds yet more evidence to Decidueye's ghost typing. Moving on, Decidueye's name comes from 3 different words: deciduous, dual, and deadeye. Deciduous refers to trees that shed their leaves in the fall and then die in the winter. This is evidenced by the use of orange dying leaves in Decidueye's design. Dual, well, come on. I mean, when I think of duel, I think of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which has nothing to do with this, and duels to the death. So, yeah. Finally, we have the word Deadeye, which means an excellent marksman, alluding to the fact that Decidueye is based on an archer. The dead part of Deadeye could also be a reference to Decidueye's ghost typing, but that one's a bit of a stretch. Decidueye is said to be able to move quickly and stealthily out of sight, being able to disappear essentially, almost like a ghost. So that pretty much explains the ghost typing, but why the archer inspiration? Well, there's one crucial point that ties Decidueye's entire design as a whole together. Its signature move, Spirit Shackle. With Alola obviously being based on Hawaii and Decidueye being based on an owl and an archer, all of this points to one thing: a story from a collection of Hawaiian legends known simply as Owl and Rat and the Boy Who Was Good at Shooting Arrows. A bit of a mouthful and very blunt to say the least, but the story tells of the owl Pueo who befriends a rat named Iole. Their friendship draws to a close as Pueo discovers that Iole has been stealing and eating potatoes from Pueo's potato patch. They end their friendship and Iole is cast out by Pueo but continues to steal the potatoes in secret. When Pueo discovers the potatoes are still being eaten, he goes to Io the hawk for help. Io turns down Pueo's request due to Iole's cunning and clever nature, but tells Pueo to appoint the help of a boy named Pikoe, who, get this, is known across the islands of Hawaii for being really good at shooting rats with an arrow. I shit you not. Pikoe helps Pueo and fires an arrow at Iole, ensnaring him by the whiskers, immobilizing him. So how does this tie into Spirit Shackle? Well, as it turns out, Iole is yet another Aumakua, just like Pueo. They are guardian spirit animals, with Iole being a rat or a mouse. So Decidueye is based on Pueo and Pikoi as an owl and an archer. And what is Spirit Shackle? Decidueye uses its signature move and fires an arrow at the opponent, ensnaring them and preventing them from fleeing or switching out. And of course, in the footage of the Japanese trailer, it's being used on Alolan Raichu, a mouse Pokemon. Also, for anyone who wants to point out that they could have used Alolan Raticate since Iole was a rat in the story, keep in mind that Alolan Raticate is a dark and normal type, so Spirit Shackle wouldn't even hit it. So Decidueye is a ghost type archer owl because it's a legendary, dead leaf, extinct owl rat shooter thing. And of course this means that our archer or ranger RPG role is aptly filled. Mystery solved. Anyway, I hope that this video helped clear up any confusion as to why the starter evolutions are typed the way they are, and if you learned something or are just impressed with the connections that I was able to make, be sure to leave a like, it really helps me out, guys. Also, be sure to subscribe if you're new to become a member of the crew. Yo, wait, bars, that rhymed, I didn't even script that in. If you think that I missed anything or have something to add, you can leave a comment below. That's all for today, so until next time, this has been Speqtor, and as always, stay bueno.